Calling to order the Committee on Labor and Tourism. Today is February 3rd, 2022, 9:30 a.m. We are in conference room 312 and also via video conferencing. We have bills on the agenda. Vice Chair, you want to?
Yeah, okay. Hello, everyone. In order to allow as many people to testify, there will be a 3-minute time limit for testimony. Please keep yourself muted and your video off until it is your turn to testify. If you're having technical difficulties, please use the chat function to contact our technical staff. However, if you are disconnected, please rejoin and we will resume your testimony if time permits. Please refrain from profanity or any uncivil language, as this behavior would be grounds for removal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Okay, first up is Bill HB 2081 relating to employer information. It amends Section 201-13.8 Hawaii Revised Statutes to allow for Department of Business and Economic Development and Tourism to collect and analyze employer information and data. First up, we have Department of Labor and Industrial Relations Director Ann Pereira Estacio.
Good morning, Chair Onishi, Vice Chair Sayama, and members of the House Committee on Labor and Tourism. The department stands on its written testimony in support of this measure, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Next up, Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism, Eugene Tian.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Good morning. DBED stand on our written testimony in supporting this bill, and I will be here for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Eugene. Okay, that's all the testimony we have. Is there anyone else here to testify on this bill? Okay, if not, members, are there any questions? Okay, if not, let's go on to the next bill. The next bill is House Bill 2448 relating to statewide data hub. It requires the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations to establish and maintain a statewide data hub to collect employer and employee data, creates positions, and appropriates funds. First up, we have Department of Labor and Industrial Relations Director Ann Pereira Estacio.
Again, good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. The department appreciates the intent of this measure, and we stand on our written testimony with concerns, and I'm here for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Next up to testify, we have Department of Business and Economic Development and Tourism, Eugene Tian.
Yes, we stand on our written testimony, providing comment on this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. And we also have testimony from the Department of Budget and Finance, Director Craig Kiri. And members, I just wanted to clarify the director's testimony in regards to the appropriation within the bill. So as everyone knows, we, the State of Hawaii, Department of Education, and University of Hawaii received funds from the federal government. And those funds that were received were subject to the state not reducing the percentage of the state budget that was allocated or that had been allocated to both the Department of Education and the University of Hawaii. So the wording in the director's testimony is just to make us aware that that is a condition of the federal funds received to those two entities, and it may affect appropriations out of the general funds to be able to maintain that percentage of the total budget for those two departments. So Just wanted to clarify that because I think many of you, if you looked at it, you go, what is this testimony all about? So that's the background for that testimony. Is there anyone else here to testify on this bill? Okay, if not, members, do you have any questions? Okay, if not, let's move on to the next bill. Next bill is HB 2447 relating to safety. It establishes a new regulatory regime for boiler inspectors and elevator inspectors, including the creation of a boiler and elevator inspectors board. Transfers the regulation of boiler inspectors and elevator inspectors from the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations to the board. Clarifies that any inspection required under the boiler and elevator safety law, including inspections required to be done by the department, may be directed to be completed by licensed qualified boiler inspectors or licensed qualified elevator inspectors. So first up to testify, we have Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, Catherine Awakuni, Director.
Aloha, Chair Onishi, Vice Chair Sayama, and members of the committee. I'm Kat Awakuni Cologne, Director of DCCA. The department would like to stand on its written testimony, respectfully opposing this measure. We've articulated a number of concerns in our written testimony, and I stand ready to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Next up, we have the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations, and Pereira Estacio, Director.
Again, good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. The department stands on its written testimony, offering comments and raising some concerns in regard to this measure. And I'm here for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Next up, we have the Department of the Attorney General, Amy Chan.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair Onishi, Vice Chair Sayama, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Amy Chan. I'm a Deputy Attorney General with the Department of the Attorney General's Office. We do have some concerns about HB 2447, and we provide these comments. The proposed board is not administratively attached to any department, which is a violation of the Hawaii State Constitution. Further, the way that the members of this proposed board is appointed may be possibly a constitutional violation of the separation of powers doctrine. Also, it should be clarified whether or not these appointments are subject to HRS 26-34. We would also recommend that the term regulation, which is used on page 8 of the bill, be amended to license to avoid any potential conflicts of the law. We would also just point out that there is a spelling error on page 8, line 17 of the bill. And lastly, we just ask that this committee consider a different effective date to ensure that the board will be up and running. We have proposed recommendations to our concerns, which are detailed in our written testimony. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'm here to answer any questions, if any.
Thank you very much. Okay, is there anyone else here to testify on this bill? If not, members, are there any questions? Okay, if not, let's move on to the next bill. The next bill is HB 2158 relating to the boiler and elevator safety law. It allows the Director of Labor and Industrial Relations to permit owner-user inspectors in the exclusive employment of owner-user inspection organizations to perform inspections on pressure retaining items and extends the time from 10 to 13 years for the director to reimburse the general fund from the boiler and elevator revolving fund. First up to testify, we have Department of Labor and Industrial Relations, and Pereira Estacio, Director.
Yes, good morning again, Chair Onishi, Vice Chair Sayama, and members of the committee. The department thanks you for hearing this administrative measure. The bill clarifies that the Director of the Department of Labor may authorize owner-user inspectors exclusively employed by owner-user inspector organizations to perform inspections of pressure retaining items. It also extends the time from 10 to 15 years for the director to reimburse the general fund from the boiler and elevator revolving fund. It will augment the ability of the department to inspect and assure the safety operation and use of boiler, pressure vessels, and pressure systems in Hawaii. We strongly support this bill and ask for your support. I'm here for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Next up, Hawaiian Electric, Simeon Powell, Superintendent.
Good morning. My name is Simon Powell. I'm the Superintendent of Technical Services within the Power Supply Engineering Group at Hawaiian Electric, and I'm testifying in strong support of HB 2158. This bill helps to clarify by statute the ability of the Director of DLIR to allow owner-user inspector organizations and to allow us to perform inspections of boilers and pressure vessels. This would align the Hawaii revised statutes with the Hawaii administrative rules. Hawaiian Electric's been an authorized owner-user organization. We were authorized by the National Board and State of Hawaii for the past 22 years, employing commissioned boiler and pressure vessel inspectors to inspect our equipment. Our OU inspectors are certified to the same standards as the insurance company inspectors and Hawaii jurisdictional inspectors. And they provide a few very important advantages. It allows us to be intimately familiar with our boilers and pressure vessels. It ensures that our inspectors are readily available for inspections and consultations, which improves our ability to serve our customers. And it ensures a professional relationship with the state of Hawaii boiler inspector branch and ensures clear expectations between Hawaiian Electric and the boiler inspector branch. Loss of ability to perform inspections under the OUIO would result in increased costs to the company and potential delays when repairing our infrastructure. And an additional purpose of the bill is to extend the time frame, as the director mentioned, to reimburse the general fund. Hawaiian Electric supports that extension since failure to do so could increase the fees charged to the company and our customers. Thank you. I am here for any questions.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here to testify on this bill? If not, members, are there any questions? Okay, if not, let's move on to the next bill. The next bill is HB 2469, relating to the Unemployment Compensation Trust Fund. It establishes an unemployment compensation insolvency special fund to be expended solely to resolve any unemployment compensation trust fund insolvency emergency declared by the governor. Permits the governor to declare an unemployment compensation trust fund insolvency emergency and to expend money from the fund if the Director of Finance determines that the fund balance is insufficient to meet the state's obligation. Appropriates money into the unemployment compensation insolvency special fund. First up to testify is Department of Labor and Industrial Relations, Ann Pereira Estacio, Director.
Good morning, Chair Onishi, Vice Chair Sayama, and members of the committee. The department stands on its written testimony with comments, and I'm also available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Next up is Lauren Zerbo, Executive Director, Hawaii Food Industry Association.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm Alexis Chapman on behalf of HFIA. We stand on our testimony in support of this measure, and I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Tom Yamachika, Hawaii Tax Foundation of Hawaii. Okay, Tom's not here. Let's see, he had comments. We have Department of Budget and Finance, Craig Kiri, Director, with comments. And we have testimony from Parents and Children Together, Ryan Kusamoto, President and CEO, with comments. Is there anyone else here to testify on this bill? Okay, if not, members, any questions? Okay, if not, let's move on to the next bill. Okay, the next bill is HB 1852, relating to the Unemployment Compensation Trust Fund. It appropriates funds for the Unemployment Compensation Trust Fund. First up to testify is Department of Labor and Industrial Relations, Director Ann Pereira Estacio.
Good morning, Chair Onishi, Vice Chair Sayama, and members of the committee. The department stands on its written testimony with comments, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Okay, next up, Lauren Zerbo, Hawaii Food Industry Association.
Good morning. It's Alexis Chapman for HFIA again, and we stand on our testimony in support, and I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And we also have testimony from Department of Budget and Finance, Craig Kiri, with comments. Is there anyone else here to testify on this bill? Okay, if not, members, are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, let's go on to the final bill. This is H Bill 2471, relating to the Adequate Reserve Fund. It amends the definition of adequate reserve fund to exclude the benefit cost rate from June 2020 to August 2021, effective for the calendar years 2023 through 2030. First up, we have Department of Labor and Industrial Relations, and Pereira Estacio, Director.
Good morning, Chair Onishi, Vice Chair Sayama, and members of the committee. The department strongly supports this measure, and I want to thank you for hearing this administration bill. This bill will ultimately determine what the benefit cost rate will be for the unemployment insurance tax schedule. The benefit cost rate is the total benefits paid during a consecutive 12-month period divided by wages for a 12-month period. The Adequate Reserve Fund is used as a measure of the solvency of the Unemployment Contribution Trust Fund and to determine the UI tax schedule in effect for any particular year. The statutory Adequate Reserve Fund is estimated at $1.77 billion for 2023. But with the enactment of this measure, the Adequate Reserve Fund would be $568 million for 2023. The tax schedule G will be in effect during calendar year 2023 instead of F with the enactment of this measure. We strongly support this bill, and I'm here for any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. We also have testimony from the Tax Foundation of Hawaii with comments. Is there anyone else here to testify on this bill? If not, members, are there any questions? Okay, if not, I do have a question for Director. Director, can you give us some additional background on the impact moving forward to from 2023 to 2030 and how this bill will, well, if we don't pass this bill, what would be the effect on the unemployment tax rates? And if we do pass it, what would be the effect moving forward?
Thank you, Chair. So prior to the pandemic period, which is March 2020 to the end of 2021, the benefit cost ratio, which helped us determine the adequate reserve for unemployment insurance and ultimately the tax schedule, was 2.20%. With the onset of the pandemic and the pandemic period, the benefit cost ratio would increase to 7.09%. That would greatly affect the tax schedule for the unemployment insurance rates for employers in Hawaii. So what happens is the benefit cost ratio is determined by the total benefits paid out as well as the total wages and the highest 10-year period. So if we kept the BCR for 7.09%, it would be established all the way till 2030, unless there was another downturn in the economy and that benefit cost ratio increased over and above 7.09%. By eliminating or removing the benefit cost ratios from March 2020 to August 2021, we essentially remove the high benefit cost rate of 7.09% and use the benefit cost rate for September of 2021. We would establish a benefit cost rate of 2.28% for the next 10 years, unless there is a downturn in the economy and the benefit cost rate increases over 2.28% after September 2021. If we left the 7.09% benefit cost rates in effect, then our adequacy would jump for 2023 to $1.77 billion. And in 2024, estimated to be $1.8 billion. If we insert the benefit cost ratio for September 2021 of 2.28%, then our adequate reserve amount would drop to $568 million for 2023, essentially bringing down the tax schedule from Schedule H to G. Any other questions, Chair?
So what would be the tax schedule moving forward? Is it at G for the next 10 years?
So no, that would vary depending on the amount of wages that came in, as well as whether we stay with the benefit cost ratio of 2.28%. But for 2023, if we do put into place the benefit cost rate of 2.28%, we would go from H to G. And it's estimated that we would go to F in 2024.
Okay, thank you. I just got notification that oh, okay. Well, we had got notification Tom Yamachika had joined and then he has left again. So members, are there any other questions? Okay, if not, we'll recess for decision making. Calling the hearing for the Committee on Labor and Tourism back to order for decision-making. Okay, on the first bill, HB 2081, since the general content of this bill is similar to that of HB 2488, we'll be deferring this measure and, well, we'll be deferring this measure. Okay, on HB 2448, since we are deferring HB 2081, it is still my intention to create the data hub. So the basis for this data hub is that in our research to address labor issues like unemployment, etc., what we found is that the state of Hawaii's available data in terms of employer-employee information is not sufficient. And the data that's collected through like unemployment and things like that have federal stipulations because unemployment insurance is completely federally funded. And so our research has found that there are many states that have started a state data hub for employer and employee information so that they can collect appropriate data to make policy decisions. So, HB 2081 was DBED's attempt to start that process. I have discussed this issue with DLIR, and initially we're going to put it in DLIR, but all of their research and stats people were moved to DBED last year. So they don't have any staffing to do this, and was one of the reasons why we had staff appropriation. But it makes more sense for us to be moving this to DBED and creating this data hub. So with that being said, for this bill, we will task DBED to set up the data hub instead of DLIR, since DLIR no longer has its research arm. I'm also going to adjust the measure to ensure that DBED has the necessary authority to do the data collection and to give DBED maximum flexibility in what type of employment data it collects. We will be blanking out the appropriations in section 2 and moving it to DBED, and we're eliminating section 3, which is the staffing. Lastly, we'll put in a defective date of December 2040 and make technical changes as needed for clarity and consistency in style. Members, are there any questions? Okay, if there are none, then Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 2448, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair, Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Bellotti.
Aye.
Representative Holt.
Aye.
Representative Kobayashi.
Aye.
Representative Quinlan.
Aye.
Representative Takayama.
Aye.
Representative Okimoto.
Aye.
Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members. Okay, next bill, HB 2447. So in light of the testimony provided to us by the Attorney General, we'll be taking the AG's recommendation to remedy the constitutional issues that were addressed in their testimony, as well as recommendations to clarify the differentiation of each department and will be responsible for each section. In section 5, page 9, line 15, we'll be changing the date to December 31st, 2024. We'll also be making technical amendments which are needed for clarity, consistency, and style, and defecting the date to December 25th, 2040. Members, any questions? Yes, Representative Kobayashi.
Thank you, Chair. I just think for some clarification, I mean, there was testimony from the Attorney General, as you mentioned, regarding the compliance with state constitutional provisions. Now, what kind of changes are you envisioning making it to now make it constitutional?
So they provided us with some recommendations. So we're going to be looking at those and applying those in order to make the bill, to adjust the bill to make it meet the constitutional requirement.
Okay, and there's also departmental issues with ambiguity as to what department will be administering this, whether it would be the current PLIR or DCCA, and also with regard to what type of interaction between the regulators and the proposed board would entail.
Yeah, so the purpose of this measure really is just to create a licensing regime for the inspectors and have that managed by the private industry. So we're not having DCCA take on the responsibility of managing the elevators and the boilers. That still will remain with DLIR. It's just the inspectors portion and ensuring that they meet appropriate training requirements, etc., to be licensed as inspectors. So that's the clarity that we're going to put into the bill.
So I got one more follow-up question, please.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So if I could just ask, what was the impetus for making this change?
Okay, so at this point, right, so the previous bill, or I'm sorry, the bill after this, right, allowed for businesses to do their own inspection with their own inspectors. But we depend on those businesses to ensure that those inspectors are fully qualified to make inspections. So there is no regulatory regime to determine whether or not those people are qualified or not. The same thing right now with elevators. All of those people are state employees, and there aren't enough to fully comply with the regulatory inspections of all the elevators and other types of, devices like escalators, etc., within the state. So this will allow for the private industry to manage licensed inspectors that can be used to ensure that those inspections are carried out by trained and authorized people within the state. And the Department of Labor can then manage the regulatory requirement, the inspections. If there's accidents, it would fall under OSHA, etc. So that's the whole concept of this bill.
Okay, so it basically meets the desires and interests of Hawai'i Electric. That's what we're saying.
Well, Hawaiian Electric is currently using their own staff, which has been the past practice. But the state does not require any kind of licensing of these people or verification that they have been fully trained. So this puts in this regulatory regime to ensure that all these inspectors meet some qualification established by the private industry.
Okay, so I haven't really gotten any satisfaction on what I'm looking to ascertain here. I'll be voting no on this measure.
Okay, thank you. Members, any other questions? Oh, Representative Bellotti.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say that I support your vote as coming from a very condo-heavy district where we need elevator inspectors. I really appreciate you working on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any further questions? Okay, if not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 2447, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Noting the attendance, any members voting no? Representative Kobayashi voting no. Any members? Representative Okimoto voting no?
Reservations, sorry.
Oh, reservations, okay. Thank you. All right, thank you. Chair, your recommendations are adopted.
Thank you, members. Okay, next bill is HB 2158. We'll be passing this measure out with technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style, and with a effective date of December 25th, 2040. Members, any questions? Okay, if not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 2158, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Noting the previous attendance, any members voting no? Any members voting with reservations? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next bill is HB 2469. This bill will be passing out with a effective date of December 25th, 2040. Members, any questions? Okay. Oh, yes, Representative Kobayashi.
So I just have a comment on this that, there's a reason why, if you look at the general ledger of any private sector company, you don't see any accounts there that say rainy day fund. And that's because it doesn't really make sense to take a bunch of money and put it away waiting for some emergency to happen. Now, there seems to be some general consensus here that that is a good idea to do in government. So we've set something up that we, I think there's a formal name for it. We call it the Rainy Day Fund. And I don't believe we should be creating other rainy day funds for any purposes. We already have one. And really, the idea of taking that money and putting it away and sitting on it just in case strikes me as particularly odd. I'll be voting no on this as well.
Okay, thank you, Representative Kobayashi. Members, any further questions? Okay, if not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 2469, Chair's recommendation is passed with amendments. Noting the previous attendance, any members voting no?
No vote.
No vote for Representative Okimoto
I already indicated my no vote, Vice Chair.
and Representative Kobayashi. Any members voting with reservations? Okay, thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Okay, the next bill is HB 1852. We'll blank out the appropriation, putting that recommendation in our committee report and defecting the date to December 25th, 2040. Members, any questions? Okay, if not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 1852, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, noting the previous attendance. Any members voting no? Any members voting with reservations? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. And the final bill is HB 2471. We'll be passing this bill out with a effective date of December 25th, 2040. Members, any questions? Okay, if not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 2471, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, noting the previous attendance. Any members voting no? Any members voting with reservations? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you. Members, just to give you a heads up, we did get some referrals of bills, triple E referred bills. So we will be having a hearing on Tuesday next week. So with that said, we are adjourned. Thank you, members.